She woke up that morning excited. Not nervous, not worried, excited, because today was the day her name was finally going to be called. She had not missed one single day of school that entire year. Not one day, not one. And that morning, she was supposed to walk up in front of the whole school and collect her perfect attendance award. She had worked the whole year for that moment, and it was finally here. She got dressed, grabbed her bag, walked out the front door. She never made it to school. By 10:30 that same morning, police officers were crouched at the bottom of a dark and hidden fire escape staircase behind an apartment building, staring down at the body of a 14-year-old girl, a child, still in her school clothes. Her name was Gloria Pointer, and the man who killed her would walk around free in that same neighborhood for nearly 3 decades before anyone ever put a name to what he did. You are watching Cases Decoded, and today, we are going all the way into one of Cleveland's most heartbreaking cold cases. A case where the wrong man was put on trial and walked free, where a mother spent 29 years writing letters and making calls and refusing to stop, and where science finally delivered the answer that nobody else could. Before we get into it, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now, drop a like on this video, and leave a comment below. Doing those 3 things takes about 5 seconds, and it genuinely helps this channel keep going. And the only reason these stories get told is because people like you show up for them. Now let's talk about Gloria. Before we get into what happened on the morning of December 6, 1984, you need to understand who Gloria Pointer was. Because this case is not just about what was done to her. It is also about who she was before it happened. And those 2 things cannot be separated. Gloria Yvette Pointer was born on February 28, 1970, in Cleveland, Ohio. She grew up on East 114th Street in a home that her mother, Yvonne, held together. She had a younger brother, and as the oldest child in the house, Gloria naturally carried that big sister role. She was the one who paid attention, the one who looked out, the one who held things steady without being told to. There was nothing chaotic about Gloria. By 14, she had already settled into herself. She was dependable, thoughtful. She cared about doing things the right way, not because someone was watching, but because that is who she was. At Harry E. Davis Junior High School, she was exactly the kind of student that teachers appreciate but rarely have to think about. She did not cause problems. She did not need to be followed up with. She showed up, she paid attention, she did the work. And in the school year leading into December of 1984, Gloria's attendance record was spotless. She had not missed a single day. Not one. Not a sick day, not a personal day, not a single morning where she stayed home. Every single school day that year, she had walked through those doors. And on December 6th, her perfect attendance was officially going to be recognized. Her name was on the list for the award ceremony that morning. That meant something to her. It was a small thing in the grand picture of a life, but to a 14-year-old girl who took pride in showing up and doing what she was supposed to do, that recognition was real. It mattered to her. At home, the bond between Gloria and her mother Yvonne had been built over years of ordinary, everyday life. Chores done side by side. Quick conversations before school. The kind of steady, quiet closeness that does not announce itself but holds a family together from the inside. Yvonne later described her daughter as thoughtful and considerate. A girl who thought about how her actions landed on the people around her. A girl who was still young but was already becoming someone you could count on. She was not a difficult child. She was not searching for edges to push against. She understood the expectations her family had for her and she worked toward them. At 14, her world was her family, her school, her friendships, and the small everyday moments that make up a young life. She cared about the people around her. She took her responsibilities seriously, and she was only just beginning to stretch out into who she was going to become. When she walked out of the front door that December morning, there was nothing about it that felt different from any other school day. No fight the night before, no bad feeling in the air, just a girl with her bag on her back, heading out, fully expecting to walk back through that same door later that afternoon with an award in her hand. That is what makes this so difficult to sit with. There was no warning, Nothing that gave any indication that this particular morning was going to end the way it did. No dramatic last conversation, no ominous sign. Just an ordinary beginning to what should have been an ordinary day. A girl who had done everything right, heading out to be recognized for it. Cleveland in December is cold in a way that gets into your bones. The kind of cold that makes everything gray and still. That Thursday morning, there was snow on the ground and more in the sky, the way early winter in Ohio can feel like the whole world has slowed down to a crawl. Gloria got herself up, got ready, and headed out the door. She had one small errand to run before she got to school. A friend of hers who lived on East 105th Street had said she could come by and borrow a comb. Gloria had a new hairstyle in mind for that day. The kind of detail that only feels small from the outside. For a 14-year-old girl heading into a morning where her name was going to be called at a ceremony, the way she looked mattered. She wanted to look right for it. Her plan was simple. Swing by her friend's house, pick up the comb, and head to school. A 5-minute detour at most. At the same time, her mother Yvonne was out in the car with Gloria's stepfather and younger brother doing their newspaper route. They drove through the neighborhood early, dropping papers before most people were even awake. As Yvonne drove, she looked out the window and spotted her daughter walking along the street. And something immediately did not feel right. Gloria was not heading in the direction of school. She was going a different way. She was cutting toward an alley that ran through the back of the buildings on that block. The neighborhood kids had a name for it. They called it the Cut. It was a shortcut that shaved some time off the walk to school. But it was also narrow, dark, enclosed, and not visible from the main street. The kind of path that feels fine during the day when things are busy and people are around but changes completely when it is early and quiet and nobody is looking. Yvonne had told Gloria before not to use that route. More than once. She did not want her daughter walking through there alone. It was not a safe shortcut no matter how much time it saved. Yvonne rolled down the car window and called out. She asked Gloria why she was going that way. Gloria kept walking. We do not know if she heard her mother's voice and kept going anyway, or if the noise of the morning swallowed the words before they reached her. What Yvonne knows is that she watched her daughter turn the corner and disappear down into that alley. She watched her go, and then she was gone. That was the last time Yvonne ever saw her daughter alive. At Harry E. Davis Junior High, the morning moved along the way school mornings do. Buses pulling up. Students spilling through the front doors. The hum of a building coming to life. Gloria's boyfriend, Deshaun, was at her locker before homeroom the way he usually was, waiting for her the way he did most mornings. Her friend Lamar had walked to school himself and recalled seeing Gloria somewhere behind him on the way there. Every sign pointed to her arriving. Everything said she should have been there. She was not. The friend she had planned to borrow the comb from told school staff that Gloria had never shown up at her house that morning. The morning moved forward without her. And when the award ceremony started and names began to be called one by one, her name came up and the room went quiet. No answer. No raised hand. No Gloria Pointer stepping forward. For anyone who knew her, that silence was loud. This was not a girl who skipped. This was not someone who would blow off an award ceremony that she had worked the entire year to attend. The fact that she was not standing in that room meant something was wrong. Everyone who knew Gloria felt it immediately. The school office picked up the phone and called Yvonne. Had Gloria stayed home? Was she sick? Yvonne was not just confused. She was shaken. She had seen Gloria walking with her own eyes less than an hour ago. She should have been at school by now. She should have been sitting in that ceremony right now. The fact that she was not sitting in that ceremony and nobody knew where she was hit Yvonne in a way that a phone call like that is not supposed to hit you. Then, less than 20 minutes after that first call, the phone rang again. This time it was the principal. He did not ask questions. He told Yvonne to call the police. 3 words. Call the police. Call the police for what? Her daughter had left home this morning. She was walking to school. She was 14 years old and she was walking 5 minutes to school on a Thursday. Why would you call the police for that? But officers were already responding. They were already on the move. Because somewhere in the few blocks between that dark alley and the front doors of that junior high school, something had happened to Gloria. And by the time anyone started asking questions, it was already too late to undo it. At around 10:30 that morning, the Cleveland Police Department received a call about something suspicious at an apartment building close to the school. Officers were sent out and made their way around to the back of the building. There, tucked against the back wall, was a metal fire escape staircase. 15 steps going down toward the basement level of the building. The area was dark even in the middle of a winter morning. It was partially enclosed, the kind of space that the street did not look into. People could walk by on the sidewalk out front and never know what was back there. At the bottom of those stairs, officers found a body. Face down, completely still. Nearby on the ground were two items: a school ID and a book bag. Both of them belonged to Gloria Pointer. Cleveland homicide detectives were called to the scene. What they found was something that people who worked that kind of case for years described as deeply disturbing. Gloria had been beaten to death. There was also evidence of sexual assault. For the people standing at that staircase that morning, trying to do their jobs and process what they were looking at, it was hard. She was a child. She was 14 years old and she was dressed for school. She had her bag with her. She had a school ID with her name on it. She was on her way to hear her name called out loud at a ceremony that recognized her for not missing a single day. Instead, she was here, at the bottom of a staircase behind a building, where nobody could see her from the street. This was now a homicide investigation. Detectives did not waste time. They locked down the area around the building and immediately began canvassing the surrounding streets. They pulled in anyone they could find who might have seen something that morning. Friends, neighbors, family members, people who lived on the block, people who had been out early. The question was always the same one. When was the last time you saw Gloria Pointer? What investigators were able to piece together was a narrow but important window of time. Between roughly 7 in the morning and 7:30, several people reported seeing Gloria walking along Orville Avenue. More than one witness also mentioned seeing a black man near her at some point during that walk. He was described as wearing a brown coat and a knit cap. It was a December morning in Ohio. Everyone had heavy clothes on. The description was far too general to zero in on anyone specific. A teacher who had been driving to school that morning told investigators they spotted Gloria around 7:10 and that she did not appear to be walking alone. Detectives mapped out the route she would have taken. It started at her house on East 114th Street and went toward the cut, the alley that ran through to the next street. The shortcut her mother had told her more than once not to use. A few days after the murder, police made their move. A man named Ramel Brown was arrested and charged with Gloria's murder. But from the very beginning, the case had real problems. Witness accounts did not fully align. The evidence being used against Brown was largely circumstantial. Questions started coming up about whether the investigation had been handled correctly from the start and whether law enforcement had settled on a suspect before the evidence fully supported it. In 1985, Ramel Brown went to trial for the murder of Gloria Pointer. He was acquitted. The jury heard the full case, weighed the evidence, and found him not guilty. He walked out of that courtroom and back into his life, and Gloria's case went cold. No conviction, no justice, no answers for a mother who had buried her 14-year-old daughter less than a year ago. The person who actually killed Gloria was still out there, still walking around, still breathing, while her file sat in a cabinet going nowhere. Here is what Yvonne did on the day they buried her daughter. She stood at that grave and she made a promise, out loud, to Gloria. She was going to find out who killed her. Not someday, not if the right opportunity came. She was going to do it. Whatever it took, for however long it took, she was not going to stop asking until she had an answer that was true. Then the years started moving. 1986, 1990, 1995. The headlines from that December morning faded completely. The detectives who had originally worked the case moved on. People got older, memories blurred, and the world filled itself back up with new things. Yvonne did not move with it. She stayed right where she was. She stayed focused on one thing, finding out who killed her daughter. That was not an obsession. That was a mother doing the only thing that made sense to her. Because for her, this was never a cold case and it was never a file. It was her daughter. A 14-year-old girl who had left the house one morning to pick up a comb and never come home. And no amount of passing time was going to change what that meant to her or make her stop asking questions. Because she stayed on it, Gloria's case never fully disappeared. Detectives came back to it periodically over the years. They went over the witness statements again. They reread the timelines. They followed up on tips when they came in. And as DNA technology started making real advances in the late 1990s and moving into the 2000s, investigators pulled out the biological evidence that had been collected from the scene back in 1984 and began running it through the new systems. Samples that had sat in storage for years and produced nothing useful were now being looked at with tools that simply did not exist when Gloria was killed. And eventually, the Cleveland Police Department built a dedicated cold case unit. A team whose entire job was to go back to cases that had gone quiet and give them new attention with modern resources. The very first case that unit sat down with formally? Gloria Pointer. That file had not been closed. It had been sitting there waiting, and now it finally had a full team behind it again. While all of this was going on, Yvonne had been writing letters to Ramel Brown, the man who had been tried and cleared. She wrote to him over and over across more than 20 years. Each time she asked him the same thing. She asked him plainly and directly whether he had killed her daughter. For more than 2 decades, she never got a single word back from him. Until September 15, 2009. That date was supposed to be the last day of Ramel Brown's life. After walking free from Gloria's case, Brown had gone on to commit other serious crimes. He had ended up on death row. September 15, 2009 was his scheduled execution date. His last chance to say anything. His last opportunity to tell the truth if he had been hiding it all those years. But what happened inside that execution chamber shocked everyone who was there. Prison officials could not find a usable vein for the lethal injection. They attempted it multiple times. Could not be done. After repeated failed attempts, the execution was officially halted and postponed. A few days later, Yvonne went to her post office box to check her mail. There was an envelope in there. She pulled it out and looked at where it came from. It was from Ramel Brown. She later said her heart nearly stopped right there in that post office. She opened it and read what he wrote. He spoke to her directly in that letter. He addressed her as Gloria's mother, and he told her straight. With his dying breath, he was saying he did not murder her daughter. He said he believed that whoever actually did kill Gloria had felt safe all these years, partly because so much attention had been focused on him. And then he told Yvonne to keep looking. Do not stop. Keep pushing. Yvonne read every word of that letter. And when she finished, she believed him. She was not naive about it. This was not wishful thinking. Her reasoning was straightforward. A man standing at the door of death has nothing left to protect. If he had been the one who killed Gloria, that moment was his chance to say so. He had no reason to lie anymore. Instead of confessing, he pointed her forward. He told her to keep going. That was not the letter of a guilty man making peace with himself. That was something else entirely. It had now been 25 years since that cold, snowy morning when Gloria walked out the front door and turned down that alley. 25 years since Yvonne stood at her daughter's grave and made her promise. She had not broken it. And she was not going to start now. By 2013, it had been nearly 3 full decades since the morning Gloria Pointer was killed. The case had been looked at more than once, retested, reopened, and followed up on. But after all that time and all that effort, there was still no one in custody and still no clear answer. Then something happened that nobody on the case had planned for. Yvonne's sister Sylvia was reading the Cleveland Plain Dealer one day and came across a story about new advances in DNA processing technology. The article explained that forensic labs were now using improved chemical methods that could extract stronger, cleaner genetic profiles from old evidence. Evidence that had been tested before and given investigators almost nothing to work with was now being reopened and producing usable results. Sylvia did not set the paper down and move on. She tracked down the reporter who wrote the piece and reached out to them directly. She asked a simple question. Could those same new techniques be applied to the biological evidence in Gloria's case? The reporter took that question to the prosecutor's office. Prosecutor Richard Bell had been connected to Gloria's case through the cold case unit for years. Over time, as technology improved, different samples from the original evidence had been tested and retested. But nothing had ever come back strong enough to meet the threshold required to be entered into CODIS, the national DNA database that would automatically flag a match if the same genetic profile turned up in the system connected to a known offender. Without that, the evidence sat. And without a hit in the database, investigators had no new name to work with. This time around, the results came back different. Using the newer processing method, the lab pulled a significantly stronger genetic profile from the biological evidence in Gloria's case. But there was something even more important. On top of that stronger profile, an additional DNA sample was successfully extracted from the clothes Gloria had been wearing on the morning she was killed. Clothing that had been held in evidence since 1984. Evidence that every previous round of testing had not been able to get anything usable from. 2 days after that reporter first made contact with the prosecutor's office, the updated DNA profile was formally submitted to the state database. The team held their breath and waited, and then it came back with something nobody had seen in 29 years of looking. A match. A real, confirmed match. After 29 years, the DNA connected to a man who was already in the system. A man who had already been through the justice system before for other crimes. A man whose profile was sitting in that database waiting. His name was Hernandez Warren, and he was already in the system. Hernandez Warren was not someone who had come in from the outside. He was from the same neighborhood. He had grown up less than a mile from Gloria's house. He had gone to Harry E. Davis Jr. High School, the exact same school that Gloria was walking toward on the morning she was killed. In 1984, the year Gloria died, Warren was 29 years old. In the years that followed her murder, he had been convicted of assault and rape connected to a burglary that happened in 1985. He served roughly 15 years in prison for that conviction. When he got out, he went back to the same community he had come from. He had been living there, moving around that same neighborhood, for years. On May 13, 2013, nearly 29 years to the day after Gloria Pointer was found at the bottom of that fire escape staircase, police knocked on Hernandez Warren's door and arrested him. After his arrest, he confessed. He told investigators that he had been under the influence of drugs when he attacked Gloria. When he tried to explain what happened that morning, the words he reportedly used were these: "I killed her, but why and how, I don't know. I was messed up." In May 2014, just a few months before he was scheduled to stand trial, Warren entered a guilty plea for the murder of Gloria Pointer. By pleading guilty, he avoided the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. In 2019, Warren tried to pull back his guilty plea. The court denied his request. Nearly 3 decades after a 14-year-old girl was found dead in a hidden staircase on her way to school, the man who put her there had been named, arrested, convicted, and put away. Not because of an eyewitness coming forward. Not because the original investigation found the right person. Because the science caught up with the truth. And because a family, led by one woman who made a promise at a grave and kept it for 29 years, made sure nobody ever stopped looking. That combination, technology and love, is what finally closed this case. There is something about a case like this that does not leave you quickly. 14 years old is not the end of anything. It is the beginning of almost everything. It is the age where you are just starting to figure out who you are and what kind of person you want to be. It is new friendships and small goals and the particular joy of being recognized for something you worked hard on. Gloria had worked hard. She had shown up every single morning for an entire school year. She had earned that recognition. She had earned the right to stand up in front of people and hear her name called. She never got to hear it. For almost 30 years, the people who loved her carried that. Not just the grief of losing her, but the uncertainty of not knowing. And uncertainty is its own kind of pain. It does not soften over time the way people say grief does. It sits inside the grief and it opens back up at quiet moments, at anniversaries, at the sight of a girl the same age walking to school with a book bag on her back. Keeps families stuck in a place where they cannot fully move forward because the thing they need most, the truth, has not arrived yet. And every year that passes without it feels like another small loss stacked on top of the first one. For 29 years, Yvonne lived in that place. And she did not accept it as permanent. She wrote letters that went unanswered for more than 2 decades. She stayed in contact with investigators. She made calls. She made sure that whenever someone was assigned to this case, they knew that a mother was still out there expecting results. She did not let the file become forgotten. She held on to that thread and she kept pulling on it even when pulling produced nothing. And when her sister Sylvia read a newspaper article and picked up the phone to ask a question, Yvonne's decades of refusal to stop mattered. Because the cold case unit existed. Because the evidence had been properly preserved. Because people had kept looking. All of that was already in place when the new technology arrived and made the match possible. When the DNA came back with Hernandez Warren's name, it was not just a scientific result. It was the answer to a promise made at a grave 29 years earlier. It was proof that staying on something matters. That one person refusing to accept silence as a final answer can actually change how a story ends. And that is something worth carrying with you. Cold cases are not just old folders sitting in boxes. They are real people with real families who are still living with a question that has not been answered. Still going to sleep at night without the thing they need most. That is worth saying out loud, and it is worth remembering. Gloria Pointer's life was short, but it was full. It was real, and it was not invisible then, and it will not be invisible now. Her name deserves to be said. Her story deserves to be told. And the people who never gave up on her deserve to have that known. May Gloria Pointer rest in peace. If this story stayed with you, please hit the like button on your way out. It takes 1 second and it genuinely helps more people find this video. And the more people who find it, the more stories like Gloria's get heard instead of forgotten. These cases do not stay alive on their own. They stay alive because people care enough to share them and talk about them. Make sure you are subscribed to Cases Decoded so you do not miss the next episode. We go deep on real cases, real people, and the truth that took too long to come out. Every week we bring you another story that deserves more attention than it got. And drop a comment below. Tell me what case you want covered next. Tell me what hit you about this one. Tell me what you are thinking. I read every single comment and your responses genuinely shape what we do next on this channel. I will see you in the next one. Stay curious and never stop asking questions.